My name is Xan Parker. I'm the Director of Education for the California Film Institute, and we are super thrilled to be doing this Q&A for Rebuilding Paradise. I want to welcome all of you for joining us. Thank you for being with us, and to, of course, our special guests, Xan Parker, one of the producers of the film, and Michelle John, one of the film subjects. If you've watched the film, she will look very familiar to you. She was former superintendent of the Paradise Unified School District. But we'll get into a little more detail about our guests as we get to meet them. I want to thank a couple of companies that made it possible for us to have this great Q&A, to National Geographic and to Abramarama, who both brought us this film and our wonderful guests. For those of you who haven't had a chance to watch the film yet, or are planning to watch it again, or want to make sure that other people watch this film, it will continue on Rafael at Home for at least another week. We opened it last week, and we'll continue on to show it longer and make it available for streaming. So again, please spread the word. And we're always making improvements to our virtual platform to make your streaming experience better and better as we go. We're this whole process, we've been learning more and more and getting more opportunities to enhance what we are doing. And so in the next few days, we'll be launching our Roku and Apple TV apps to make viewing even easier. So keep an eye out for information about that, and that will be coming soon. And then, of course, as far as the Q&A goes, I will be asking a bunch of questions, and then, of course, I will open it up for questions from all of you. If you have questions for Xan or Michelle, please just type them right into the Q&A tab. And I will ask them on your behalf. If you want to just leave some comments keep engaging with each other around this film, feel free to add some comments into the chat. We'll be taking those as well, but it's a lot easier if you put all of your questions directly in the Q&A, so we have those in one place, so I know where to look to make sure that they get answered. So welcome to you both, Xan and Michelle. Really appreciate you taking the time to be with us tonight. I've watched this film a couple of times, and so actually, Michelle, for some reason, there's a little bit of extra sound in your, I think it's coming in through your speaker. When you're not actually speaking, do you mind muting, just so, because it's giving us a funny little feedback. I'll give you plenty of warning when it's you that I'm going to ask. Thank you. I'm not sure what that sound is, because, technology. So I can't think of any film that has made me cry this much before the title card even appears. This film is just, I'm just wondering, as a starting point, how you gathered all of that incredibly intense footage from the fire itself as it was happening. I'd seen a few other films about this, and about, obviously, wildfires in general, but like, to see people capturing all this footage while they're right in the middle of this, incredible emergency, while their lives in such imminent danger, and seeing them come from a lot of different perspectives. I'm wondering how you guys kind of gathered all of that type of, opening footage.
Well, that's a good question. It was a lot of work. First, to the point of people filming it, I would say that and Michelle, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it just shocked people so much what they were going through. And it was so hard to believe what was happening around them that they documented it because they felt they had to. It was just the strangest thing they'd ever seen and the scariest thing they'd ever seen. Also, many people thought they weren't going to see their loved ones again and might not make it through. So a lot of people also documented it for that reason. And then the third thing to remember is that they were actually stuck on that highway for a really long time. So, you might be seeing footage in the beginning that someone hadn't even started taking until the third hour of being in really scary traffic trying to get out. And then in terms of getting it from everyone, the people of Paradise and of Northern California in general, I completely fell in love with the people of Butte County, the town of Paradise, the town of Concow, and the town of Magalia. And everyone there kind of wanted the world to know they existed, they were there, they went through this horrible thing and they survived, and they wanted to give us their footage. It was a lot to look through. It's such a sad thing for everyone to watch. It's much sadder for them to watch, the people who went through it. But, Ron was very keen on everyone being able to have a taste of what that experience was like.
And Ron Howard obviously is not traditionally known for working on documentaries. So how did he decide to take this project on, and did he have a direct connection to Paradise, or was it just the compellingness of the story, and maybe, you know, how you got connected as well?
Sure. So Ron actually has a lot of his family lives in Reading, so not too far away. And there had been a fire about a month, I want to say 5 or 6 weeks before, Michelle, called the Car Fire that was up there earlier that year. It might have even been a couple months before, which was actually such a horrendous fire that it was considered like a career fire by most of the firefighters who were there. They had no idea what was coming next. And so he had watched that and was very nervous about his loved ones who were there. And then when it happened in Paradise, you know, he also felt connected to Paradise because his mother-in-law had lived there for a little while before she died. You know, so it really kind of grabbed his heart. And, you know, he and another colleague at Imagine talked about, could it be a film? And they had just started the Imagine Documentaries division. So they called up Justin Wilkes and Sarah Bernstein, who run that division, who've been doing documentaries for a very long time as executives. And so you know, Sarah and Justin ended up bringing some other filmmakers and myself in who were seasoned documentarians to work with Ron on it.
Nice. So Michelle, can you talk a little bit about what the situation in Paradise is now? You know, how many people have returned, maybe a little bit about where you're at in relation to Paradise and what you've been doing since the film ended, and what the rebuilding is looking like?
Right, there's about 3,000 people that have returned to Paradise. I think that they're up to a couple hundred homes, maybe not that many yet. It's a long process to get through there. Somebody had asked about the water. The water is fine. It took a while. They had to replace, you know, all the pipes that had burnt, and the benzene from melted pipes had gotten into the water. A lot of people, including ourselves, when we had our house, had put in a water filter. Our house did not burn down, but we were out of it for 8 months because they had to gut the house. And then if you've seen the movie, you've seen the tragedy that happened in my life personally. And so last December, I decided, it wasn't in the plan at all, but I decided to retire and move closer to my grandkids. And so I now live in Reno, Nevada, and yet I have recently purchased a piece of property back in Paradise because that's where we raised our children and lived for over, you know, for close to 40 years. And it's home. And so I will eventually move back to Paradise.
And how many, does it feel like a new community is really kind of truly rising out of the ashes? I mean, are you seeing that up there?
Very, very slowly. The school district itself had excellent insurance, but we don't have the kids to rebuild the schools. So what we're doing is we are making the schools state of the art, the schools that are still standing. So new STEM labs, new career technical education labs. We're not rebuilding per se new schools because there's just not the students. But we also know that if we build state of the art schools, that they will come. You can't have a town without excellent schools. We do know that. So we are slowly rebuilding the schools so students will come. Now, of course, COVID has put a whole new layer onto all of this, but they are working very, very hard to get the students back up the hill.
And how well have you been staying connected to people who didn't return? Like, how fracturing was it for the community as far as your connections to people that you've known for, you know, like you said, decades?
Thank goodness for Facebook. We all stay connected. I was telling someone I know in Reno, I said, I have no Facebook friends in Reno. Everyone is Paradise. We stay connected. We talk every single day, Paradise people. We will never not be connected. We even people who are, you know, we have them in Idaho, we have in Tennessee, everywhere, and yet we are all still connected and share every single day.
Great to hear. You could tell that. I mean, you get that whole sense of community from.
Yeah.
Xan, can you talk a little bit about how you selected the community members you ultimately focused on in the film? And were there others maybe who didn't want to participate?
Yeah, so a few people didn't want to participate, but most people did, for the same reason that they documented the fire. They wanted to participate in something that was going to share their town and their community with the rest of the world. And I think that people trusted Ron to tell the story. They trusted, he is Opie and Richie Cunningham and so many more things to all of us. Those of us who are a little bit older. But I think that people felt that really coming across when they met him. And I mean, I did too. That's the way he is, just naturally. He's a really kind human being. And, I would trust him to tell my life story. So it was not that hard to convince people. It was hard, I think, in the edit really to figure out, which stories could we just not put in and not include. We could have easily made, a 20-hour film with what we had. That was a little heartbreaking, but we, in the end, selected the folks who we felt sort of together represented the spirit of the whole community.
Yeah, no, and obviously some really powerful choices. So I'm wondering, well, have the people from Paradise seen the film and what their reactions are? And I'm wondering also, Michelle, from your perspective, how, as you mentioned, there's kind of a double trauma that you experienced during the course of this film, and how it is for you to kind of relive that in a sense by watching it and sharing that story, which, thank you, by the way, for sharing your story.
Yeah, it's very difficult. If it wasn't for Xan and Liz Moorhan, the other co-producer, it'd be very difficult. We became close friends over this time, and so we talk quite often. And and Link, who shot all the footage, I trusted them with my life, or I would never have allowed anyone like that at my husband's memorial. It's difficult, but we talk and we laugh and we just share our love for each other. It's hard for the people of Paradise to relive it all the time. Also, some of them are still living in motorhomes and tents. You need to know that they don't have homes. Most of them do not have homes yet. And so they're still living in transient living situations. And so it is difficult to relive this. They are hoping that it calls attention to this was not something that just happened one day and it was over, that this will be a lifelong process to move through.
Xan, do you want to talk a little bit? You said, we were talking earlier, you were talking about the screening and how they've actually had a chance to watch the film.
Yeah, it's really interesting. We first showed the film at Sundance Film Festival. Michelle was there, and some of the other people who are our main characters, so to speak, were there, and it's extremely emotional for them to watch, as you can imagine. But those who we were closest to in Paradise had told us then, and also when they were the virtual screenings in, I think it was early July, that it was cathartic for them to watch, and it helped them sort of make it this story that happened. Now they have a record of it, and it helps them to maybe separate a little bit. But on the other hand, I'll tell you that Matt Gates, who's the police officer in the film, has not watched it, and it's too hard for him to watch. It's very, very challenging for the first responders, in particular, the firemen, who have an incredible sense of, this is so sad to say, but they have an incredible sense of guilt that they couldn't save their town. And they know it's irrational, but that has caused a lot of PTSD in that community.
Right, I can imagine. And yes, that's your job and you can't control it. Some things you just can't. So I'm wondering what the status of the PG&E lawsuits are. I sort of obviously track it a little bit, just the whole PG&E situation, being a Northern Californian, but, wondering kind of if there's any meaningful compensation for the community or kind of where all of that currently stands.
Well, supposedly it's been funded, and all of us that have attorneys that have been working with them, we will supposedly be receiving something in January. There's no amount of monetary that will ever take the place of what happened. I was lucky enough to be able to share that with the president and the board of PG&E and the federal judge, saying this isn't about money. There's no amount of money that will ever take the place of our loved ones or what happened to our town and our community that we all lived so closely together for so many years. But it will help people who were not insured or insured to their fullest and who are still living transient. Hopefully this will come through in January when it is supposed to come through, some of the funding.
do you feel like there's any sense of accountability that you're getting? Like, I feel like you say like that the monetary isn't so important, but that sense of accountability I would think would be more valuable for you.
Right, that's what it is. It's the fact that they have acknowledged that. When I was talking to the board and the president, I said, putting these business practices in front of an entire community, historical community, and lives and everything, your crummy business practices of not keeping up with your equipment, that's just like us not taking care of our cars or our homes. You didn't take care of business. Your stockholders or whatever were more important than taking care of what you needed to. So I do believe they have taken responsibility. I hope it goes beyond that, and I hope that they change their business practices. I don't want them just to take responsibility. I don't want this to ever happen to anybody else.
I would just add that, I've been learning a little bit lately from my brother-in-law, actually, who's a corporate lawyer, about some really massive businesses that are public companies that are starting to think differently about who they are accountable to. And it was, as we know, it was really like in the past 30 years that companies felt that they were more accountable to their stockholders than to their employees and their customers and to the community around them that they're serving. And this is a moment for PG&E that we all hope that they take a lesson from. They haven't taken lessons from it in the past. I mean, Michelle and I were talking to Erin Brockovich just last week about this. And, she's been fighting for so long against that company, and so many people have been affected by their carelessness. But it's important, and I think all of us at the time of COVID can feel this now very strongly, that those kinds of companies need to be accountable to their communities.
Well, and obviously, we're back in the beginning of fire season in California again. So I'm just wondering, are there any lessons that are learned that you're seeing, like, are that are being implemented in other at-risk communities? Is there other stuff that's happening?
I'm hoping Michelle will unmute in a second, but
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I do believe, our fire was absolutely the perfect storm. I don't know if there was a more well-prepared community than Paradise. Our Fire Safe Council was very, very active. They went around and they spoke every single week to groups. People all had their go bags. We had practice egress. We had shut down roads and practice egress before, but this was absolutely the perfect storm that within, like Woody says, within 3 hours, our entire town was gone. This was not something where you had any time at all. So when you get on the roads, they are just packed. I know my husband actually went up and over, because a lot of people, we haven't talked about in the movie, but there was another way out that's not paved or anything or incorporated, but you can go up and over and get out that way. And people did that. What the lesson is for people is be prepared. And I think that hopefully PG&E will, when they say there's going to be wind, they will be proactive. They will take care of their equipment. And I know there's all kinds of other reasons. I mean, just pulling a car off the side of the road will start a fire. And so people need to be really, really cognizant of what starts a fire, and when fires start, to get on them immediately before a perfect storm happens. And fires make their own weather, so you have to move quickly.
When we were editing the film, I was talking to someone at Cal OES, your amazing agency that I'm so jealous of as a New Yorker, the California Office of Emergency Services that the governor put together. I was talking to them, and they said the best thing you can do in any of these circumstances is to prepare yourself, or not in these circumstances, but in anticipation. And by prepare yourself, it's about being accountable to yourself and to your neighbors and your community, so that you don't have to lean on government agencies afterwards, or you don't have to lean on charity, because there's going to be an incredible strain, and you have to expect that. So it's not just doing all the things that that Michelle's husband, Phil John, was a big part of with the Fire Safe Council and preparing your property, but it's also about figuring out what's your plan. It's your personal, sometimes emotional go bag. That's something we all now need to do in the age of this pandemic.
Right. So I was wondering that too, Michelle, like, how do you prepare for, like, I would imagine that just knowing how triggering, the wildfire season would be for, just sort of how you approach it now, not just physically, but, mentally, emotionally to make it through these seasons, and not, with not knowing what's coming and, but knowing what's possible. How do you tend to manage them?
Well, like Xan said, you prepare yourself emotionally. You really cannot have the mindset of it can't happen to me, because it can, because we had a perfect little community and it happened to us. So, I mean, it's as simple things as, like Woody likes to tell everyone, have a full tank of gas at almost all times. When your gas, the new empty is half full. A lot of people ran out of gas, and then a lot of cars burnt, and then because people couldn't go anywhere. I mean, it's simple things. It's making sure you know where your insurance papers are, making sure you have a plan for your animals and for your elderly parents or grandparents. It really is, you need to have a plan down. And I think for Phil and I, it actually went very smoothly, because our plan was he was to go up and get my blind 86-year-old mom if there was ever a fire, and that's exactly what he did. And the neighbor got the dog. I mean, we had all talked about this. We knew what we were going to do if we weren't home when a fire happened. But I mean, there are plans all over the web where you have to have your medicines. Don't let your medicines go, because people had no way to get their medications. Don't let them, go very low. Don't let your gas tank go low. Make sure you know where your insurance papers are. Talk to your spouse and your family and your significant others about what's the plan, especially if you aren't home. What's the plan? What are you going to do? Because you're not getting back up that hill or back up to your home if you're away and something like that happens. So it's some of it's common sense. A lot of it's planning and actually discussing it and not thinking it can't happen to you.
Okay. So one of the things, obviously the issue of, climate change and the environmental impact is an undercurrent of the story, but it's never really the main focus. I'm just wondering, Xan, sort of how you figured out the balance of sort of the human impact of the tragedy versus the environmental impact. And, there's obviously a lot of layers to the story.
Well, it's funny sometimes to talk about the climate change aspect of it. Of course, it was on Ron's mind. It was on all of our minds. Not everybody in Paradise agrees that that's an element of what happened. And I think everybody certainly, has to have their own way of interpreting it, especially when it does happen to you personally. My takeaway really was that it was, PG&E, that was where the spark came from. But the tinder was laid for that fire from centuries of land use and corporations and homesteading, and then also just global climate change. So really all of us are responsible in some way for what happened to the people of Paradise because of how we treat the planet. It was warmer and windier later in the season than it normally would have been. And meantime, the way that a lot of that land is forested has to do with, what happened to the land after homesteading. So, it's maybe an invitation, I hope, for people to learn their history in California and really kind of think hard about what makes the land so burnable. Right. And sorry, I was just going to say, it was hard to strike that balance. For us, it was mainly the people, though, and their experience. So that's why there's not that much of it in the film.
Right. And I presume that the concept of sort of rebuilding and rebirth and the positive side of it was always the approach that you guys were going for?
Yeah, I mean, the rebuilding it's a great idea. There are only 200 homes that have been rebuilt by now, and there used to be, Michelle, was it like 11,000 homes or something? I mean, just an incredible amount of homes. And the rebuilding is not as much about the physical rebuilding as it is how you rebuild your soul.
Yes. Michelle, have you stayed in contact with, some of your kids, from the school, just some of those graduating seniors and sort of, where they're at now?
Yep, of course. In fact, I went back last June and was part of the drive-through graduations and all of that. And I've always had a rule that I won't be a Facebook friend with kids when they're in high school, but once they're out, then it's okay. So now I'm friends with a lot of the graduating seniors. And you need to understand, it's such a small community that they all grew up together. We were there. I was an elementary school principal, then I was also the high school principal. So I've known these kids forever, and their parents and their grandparents. It's a multi-generational town. So the kids are moving on with their life. They're struggling. They're moving on with their life, but a lot of them are staying and going to the local community college, Butte, which is a fabulous community college. A lot of them had plans and they went off to various colleges just like any other year. I'm not sure the kids of that graduating class, I think they were as successful as any other class. We brought in a lot of emotional and mental health support, and we are still doing that. And we give kids a lot of outlets to talk about it. I think that graduating class is going to be okay. I worry about now this one with COVID and the classes that are coming up where they're not at the same schools with the same friends for 13 years like they had planned. I think it will be a different look down the street because like Xan said, very few houses have actually been rebuilt.
What's your timeline for when you're planning to build your house up there?
You know, I would really like to see it done in the next 2 years. I'd like to see it built and done in the next 2 years.
Was it just knowing, obviously, with the need for all sorts of construction all at once? I know that was an issue after the fire, you know, in Santa Rosa. You know, how has that been? Does it mean that you sort of do have to wait in line because there's not enough, you know, there aren't enough people?
That's true. I know a lot of contractors, and I would never pull them off of a job that needed to be for a family that needed to live there. I have a beautiful home in Reno, and I don't have to be there. I just want to be part of the solution and help people rebuild. So I'm more than willing to take my time. And I have friends who have rebuilt, and so I always have a place to stay if I want to come back for a week or two and help and do things. I would rather than build a home for somebody who needs a home to live in than work on my home.
Did you want to add something, Xan?
You know, I was just going to say that there were a lot of questions at other film festivals about, which maybe are just not natural in Northern California Film Festival, but about whether or not people should rebuild. And I think it is so important for people to remember like what their community means to them, their family, a house where they raised their children, a school where they sent their children, the local coffee shop where, you know, they met their mom every Saturday. It's just home, you know, and you don't get that easily somewhere else. So, you know, what Michelle has is incredible because she could go to Reno where she has lived before, be close to her grandchildren and stay in touch with people. But I just don't think it's fair for anyone to judge the people who rebuild or go back because, you know, they miss their town.
Yeah, well, it's funny. That question doesn't occur. I mean, you know, because people could say that in hurricane zones and, you know, and now that's one of the reasons, you know, I kind of ask about the environmental impact because, you know, there aren't really necessarily safe places. I mean, like you said, it was a perfect storm, Michelle. So it could, you know, like the hill above my house here burns every few years and, you know, they bring out the goats. You know, just 2 days ago, there was a fire inspector coming around from house to house, you know, looking at our defensible space. Like it's, you know, it's real in a lot of places. So I sort of feel like if we decide we can't go back there and rebuild, you know, like can lightning strike twice? Sure. But you know, we run out of space after a while of where we can go back to. And like you said, you know, the community is the community.
Yeah. And the key thing is like, Michelle, maybe you can explain I forget what WUI stands for, the Wildlife Urban Interface.
Wildlife Urban Area. I'm missing a word in there.
But that's actually, I think, an important thing for people to consider when they talk about, it's not so much climate change. There's climate change, but there's also this issue of the fact that in California, you have a housing crisis and housing shortage and naturally your population has been growing and people are going to live in these beautiful places that are closer to areas where there normally would be forest fires. And in addition, the way that land where the forests are is managed very, in a way that has a little bit more to do with profits from large publicly held corporations, a little less to do with, you know, the way we take care of our planet or each other.
There's a question in the chat I see kind of on top of that. It says, what % of fire-wise and safe landscaping had the community done before the fire and how prepared was the community regarding their landscape?
that was a hot topic, a very hot topic. I mean, in fact, there was a slogan that was all over town called "Doom the Broom," which is a weed from no other way that grows in paradise. It's highly flammable. So there was a lot of talk about fire safe environments and how you had to have defensible space, and CAL FIRE would come up and out and talk to anyone. So at the Fire Safe Council, we did not lose our house. We had huge defensible space, but there were people who lost their house that had that also. So I would say it was a huge topic in Paradise. Everyone knew to have defensible space. So far as the plants on what to plant, that is a larger topic now than it was before. I know that even we had bark. Everyone loves bark. I will never be in a home that has bark again. Bark is it's beautiful, but it's highly flammable. So we learned a hard lesson there. We lost a lot of trees with bark around it. And I don't know if the town has banned bark, but I know that everyone in Paradise has been talking no bark for a long time, and to use fire resistant plants. There's a whole list on the website of fire resistant plants. So it is at the forefront. I can't tell you what the percentages are, but I know that it is a hot topic.
So, and just as you mentioned, you mean the website for the film, do you want to talk maybe a little bit, Xan, about kind of resources that you have related to the film and kind of where the film is going, in addition to screening, on our virtual cinema platform, kind of what your hope is for it in its general rollout, in current situation?
Yeah, and actually, I'm terrible at remembering the URL, but I hope that National Geographic will share it with you guys so you can put it on your website. There is a page of the film's website that actually gives a few different nonprofits that can be donated to help the people of Paradise and to help the organizations that show up at moments like this. And so I think that's important. I really do hope that everyone will also take away that idea that in addition to making donations or supporting the community, that they also prepare themselves for whatever might be the worst thing that comes down the pike, so that, they're not a burden on other people and their communities and their government agencies and the nonprofits around them. Yes, I would just leave you with that thought.
Well, I just want to thank you both so much for taking the time to talk to us today. And thank you, Michelle, again, for sharing your story. And we wish you the best with your ongoing building and all the people of Paradise, sending our best. And thank you so much for sharing the film, Xan. It's been great to talk to you guys.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
You bet.
Take care.